Hey guys, lesson 2.8. Today we're going to be doing it the other way and writing fractions as decimals. So when writing a fraction as a decimal, your result is always a terminating or a repeating decimal. A repeating decimal repeats a pattern of one or more digits. So if you have 1 over 2, that would become 0.5. That is a terminating decimal. Now, but if you have the fraction 2/3, you're going to get 0.6, and it's going to be a pattern of 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, over and over and over and over, so that our decimal is 0.6 repeating. Okay, now this bar at the top is what identifies what is repeating. So if you had a decimal 0.272727, you would write your decimal as 0.27 with a line over the 2 and the 7 because both the 2 and the 7 are repeating. Okay? So we're going to do it a couple different methods. The first method we're going to do right now is to write a fraction as a decimal. First we're going to divide the numerator by the denominator. So on A here it says write 1/8 as a decimal. I want you to first realize what this bar is. Now some of you might already remember it is called the fraction bar, but I've said several times in class that this is also called the division bar. The division bar identifies what you should do. 1 divided by 8. If you read it from top to bottom and you consider that a division sign, it's 1 divided by 8. So if you do the long division, the 1 would go inside, the 8 on the outside, and you do 1 divided by 8 until you reach 0 or you find a pattern. Now notice here we actually reach 0 and there is no pattern, so our decimal is just 0.125. Okay, so this is for a terminating decimal. When your remainder is 0, the decimal terminates. It doesn't go on forever and ever and ever with a pattern. So on B, when we have 5 over 6, a quick trick is if your denominator is a multiple of 3, right off the bat you will know it's going to be repeating. So since 3 can go into 6, our denominator, I know it's going to be repeating. So if we do the division and we get 5 divided by 6, you're going to get 0.833, and if you keep going on, if you notice, we keep getting 20, 22. When we bring down another 0, we're going to end up with 20. So we're going to constantly have a repeat of this number 3. If we were to keep going, we would get 2 again, bring down another 0. Oh my goodness, it keeps going on and on and on. So our decimal is 0.8333333 because that 3 will constantly repeat itself. So the decimal we write is 0.83 with a repeating bar on top to identify that that number will repeat over and over and over. Okay? So that's one way of finding your answer. The second method is to write a fraction as a decimal. We can write an equivalent fraction, if possible, whose denominator is 10, 100, or 1,000. Now this one doesn't happen as often. It only works out on occasion. So if you look here, and we have the decimal 3 over 20, you're going to ask yourself, can I change my denominator to be 10, 100, 1,000, any one of those place value numbers we did in the last video? So we're looking for tenths place, hundredths place, thousands place, so on and so forth. If you notice, we can multiply 20 by 5 and get 100. So if we multiply it by 5, our new fraction will be 15 over 100. That means, if I were to read that properly, that would be 15 hundredths. That means my 15 number needs to end in the hundredths spot. So it's just like what we did in the last video when we went decimals to fractions. It's just now doing it in the reverse. So we get 0.15 because if this 5 ends in the hundredths place, this is 15 hundredths. Same thing as this, 15 hundredths. You read them the same way because they're the same number. So if you can turn your denominator into 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, so on and so forth, you can just put it into a decimal form based on the place value. Okay? All right, let's try a word problem. You run the 40-yard dash in 6 and 21/25 seconds. Your teammate runs it in the time shown. Who is faster and by how much? So notice your friend is 6.9 seconds. We need to turn this fraction into a decimal in order to compare them. You can only compare two numbers if they're in the same form, either a fraction with a common denominator or both decimals. So because of this lesson, we're going to turn this fraction into a decimal and compare it to 6.9. So there's two different ways you could do this. You could just do 21 divided by 25, or you could notice, oh, the 25 could turn into 100 if I times it by 4. So you can use either one of the methods you learned today. So first we separate it because we know we're going to have a 6 as a whole number. Now they chose method 2. They chose to make the denominator into 100, so it's 84 over 100. That means I need to have an 84 in my hundredths spot. So it would be 6.84. By looking at this decimal, you can see that 6.9 is actually bigger, which means you are faster. Because the smaller your time, the faster you are. So who is faster? You're faster, and by how much? Because that's what it asks. Who is faster and by how much? You're faster than your teammate, and by how much? 0.06 seconds. So you are faster by 0.06 seconds. See how that works? All right. That is the end of this lesson. Please take your time and try both of the methods we learned today. Okay? If you have any questions, let me know.